Dry Creek always wore a coat of dust, especially on festival nights. Every stomp of a horse's hoof sent red dirt spiraling into the warm evening air, drifting like smoke against the lantern glow. The Harvest Festival had the whole town gathered in the open square, ranchers in their Sunday shirts, women in bright prairie dresses, fiddlers scraping out vigorous tunes while couples twirled around the fire pit. Ellena stood alone beneath the weather-worn awning of the old saloon, half hidden in shadow. She didn't push forward into the laughter or the sway of music. She never did. The world out there, the shouting, vibrant whirl of townfolk, always felt like a place she was allowed to look at, but not step into. Her dark hair, braided tight for work rather than beauty, brushed her shoulders as the wind picked up. The Apache in her face showed in the sharpness of her cheekbones, the quiet intensity in her eyes, the unyielding posture she held even when she felt small. She kept her arms folded, more from habit than cold. Dry Creek rarely saw true cold in early autumn, but Ellena always held herself as though she expected life to throw something heavy at her at any moment, and she was ready to brace it. Just a few yards away, her three younger white cousins spun through the firelight, skirts flying, their laughter ringing like bells. They were pretty, lively, delicate, everything the town approved of. Every cowboy passing through seemed eager to offer a hand, a smile, a drink. Men fought over chances to dance with them, to pull them into the circle where the flames painted everything gold. Ellena watched without bitterness, but also without belonging. She'd long ago accepted her place. She was the one in the background, the worker, the helper, the one who made sure things kept running when other people were out shining. All month she had cooked, cleaned, carried water, fed livestock, and helped the Reverend's wife keep their small farm afloat. All year she had been the one patching roofs, repairing fences, tending fires, doing the work that no one noticed unless it wasn't done. And 2 years earlier, when her grandmother left her a small inheritance, she had poured every cent into saving the Reverend's land from foreclosure. Dry Creek had talked about that for months, talked even louder when the money still wasn't enough. Now debt hung over the family like a dark storm cloud. People whispered about it openly tonight, some with pity, others with something colder. The kind of talk that traveled fast in a small frontier town. Ellena heard every whispered word, though she pretended she didn't. She only curled her fingers into a fist at her side, breath steady and silent. She had always been the one who carried the weight. That wasn't going to change. The fiddlers struck a brighter tune, and cheers rose around the fire. Lantern smoke drifted across the square, and wind blew the scent of grilled corn and roasting meat toward her. Children ran past the saloon steps, kicking dust into the air as they chased each other. Horses snorted, tied up along the hitching posts, restless under the rising noise. Then, just as another wave of laughter swept the crowd, a ripple of hush moved through the square. Bootsteps, heavy, measured, like someone who owned every inch of ground he walked on. Ellena lifted her gaze. A lone rider had appeared at the crest of the hill, horse tall and muscular, mane dark as coal. The man in the saddle sat straight-backed, broad-shouldered, his silhouette outlined by torchlight. Even from a distance, the townsfolk recognized him. Sebastian Crane, owner of Silver Mesa Ranch, the wealthiest, most influential landowner anywhere near Dry Creek. His name traveled ahead of him like a cold wind. As he guided his horse down the slope, conversation thinned to murmurs. Women lowered their voices. Men straightened their hats. Children stopped mid-run, wide-eyed. Few people in Dry Creek saw Sebastian up close unless he had business with them, and his business was rarely small. He slowed near the firelit square, scanning the crowd with a calm, unreadable gaze. Not searching, judging, weighing. And then, unexpectedly, his eyes shifted away from the glowing festivities. They found the darkness beneath the saloon awning, found the girl who never joined the dance, found Ellena. For a breathless second, his attention didn't stray. He looked at her as if he knew her story without needing a single word spoken. Ellena felt her pulse jump. She had always lived unseen, yet the most powerful man in the territory had looked straight into the shadows and seen her. Morning rose over Dry Creek with the slow, amber glow that always followed a restless festival night. Dust still hung in the air, stirred by cattle lowing somewhere beyond the fields and by the distant creak of wagon wheels starting their day. The town was quiet now, almost bashful after last night's rowdy celebration. Ellena stepped out from the Reverend's small farmhouse, her arms full of laundry, ready to hang the wet clothes on the sagging line. Her muscles ached from days of work, but she never complained. Work meant purpose. Work kept the roof over everyone's head. Work kept her from thinking too much. But as she bent to pick up a fallen sheet, the rhythmic pounding of hooves echoed along the dirt road. Slow, deliberate, confident. No ranch hand rode like that. No traveler carried that kind of presence. Ellena looked up. Sebastian Crane was coming straight toward the farmhouse. His gray stallion kicked up clouds of red earth with each step, the kind that shimmered in the morning sun like drifting sparks. Sebastian sat tall in the saddle, jaw set, eyes steady, just as he had been the night before under lantern fire. Except now, in the quiet daylight, he seemed even more imposing, like a man carved out of the land itself. The Reverend stepped out onto the porch, nearly dropping his coffee cup. "Mr. Crane," he stammered, we weren't expecting visitors so early." Sebastian dismounted with a controlled grace, his boots landing firmly in the dirt. He didn't greet the Reverend. He didn't greet the Reverend's wife, who peeked nervously from behind the door. His attention went straight to Ellena, standing barefoot in the dust, a damp sheet still clutched to her chest. "Ellena," he said, nodding once. Her throat tightened. "Mr. Crane." He didn't waste time. Sebastian was not a man who circled around his intentions. "I'll speak plainly," he said, voice low but unwavering. "I need a wife who is strong, hardworking, and capable of running a ranch the size of Silver Mesa. I don't need ornamentation or charm or social graces that disappear when winter comes." His expression didn't soften, but his gaze sharpened. "I need someone who can stand steady in a storm. Someone with grit." The wind kicked up, sending a swirl of dust between them. And then he delivered the blow that made the Reverend freeze. "I choose you." Ellena felt her heart knock hard against her ribs. Not because he asked. Men asked women all the time in Dry Creek, though rarely with such bluntness. No, it was why he asked. Because he had been watching her, studying her. Last night she had assumed his gaze was swept over her by accident. It wasn't. She remembered how he had looked at her from his horse, how the lantern light caught in his eyes. He had seen her scrub spilled whiskey from the saloon step. He had seen her carry buckets of water to strangers without being asked. He had seen her step back, fade into shadow, and never demand a single thing. Sebastian Crane noticed everything. The Reverend's wife hurried down the steps, wringing her apron between trembling hands. "Ellena, dear, this is a blessing. If you accept, Mr. Crane can help us keep this place. The bank can't take what's already paid for." The Reverend cleared his throat, trying to hide the ache of desperation. "It would solve everything." Ellena stared at the dust swirling around her bare feet. Her grandmother's inheritance, everything she had, was already gone, spent to save this very farm. And still, it wasn't enough. She could hear the whispers in town. Failure, debt, pity. She could see the fatigue in the Reverend's face, the quiet fear in his wife's eyes. They had taken her in when she had no one. Did she owe them this? No, duty didn't feel like debt. It felt like survival. Sebastian stood silent as she wrestled with the truth. His presence was steady, unflinching, the way a mountain stood against changing weather. Not gentle, but immovable, an anchor for anyone strong enough to meet it. Ellena finally lifted her gaze to him. There was no romance in her chest, no dreamy flutter, only resolve, clean, quiet, and razor sharp. "If I agree," she said softly, "it won't be for love." "I'm not asking for love," Sebastian replied. "I'm asking for a partner." The wind tugged at her braid. A hawk cried somewhere above the bluffs. Ellena nodded once. "Then yes," she said, "I'll marry you." Sebastian didn't smile. He simply tipped his hat in acknowledgement, as though sealing a business deal carved into stone. But inside the farmhouse, the Reverend's wife burst into relieved tears. Outside, Ellena stood still, steadfast, unshaken, bracing herself for the life she had just agreed to, a life carried by wind and red dust. The trail leading to Silver Mesa Ranch wound through miles of open country, sunburned prairie, clusters of dry sage, and hills that rolled like frozen waves. By the time Ellena saw the first fence line, the afternoon sun had stretched long strokes of gold across the land. Wind brushed her face with the scent of dust, horses, and distant pine. But nothing prepared her for the sight of the ranch itself. Silver Mesa stretched all the way to the base of the mountains. Broad, rugged, breathtaking. The main house rose from the earth like it had grown there over generations. A tall, timber-framed structure with wide porches, stacked stone chimneys, and windows reflecting the last amber flare of daylight. It wasn't fancy, but it carried the weight of legacy. Strong, solid, unapologetically Western. A corral full of sleek, powerful horses stood near the barn, their coats glossy under the sun. Black, chestnut, palomino, each one well-fed, well-muscled, restless with the energy only open land could give. Beyond them, a wide sweep of silver-green grass shimmered under the fading light, rolling out to the horizon like an ocean of metal blades. Dozens of ranch hands were scattered across the property. Some hauled hay bales, others repaired fence posts. A few were leading cattle back from grazing land. They all paused when Sebastian rode in. Their nods carried respect. Quiet, automatic, deeply ingrained. Sebastian dismounted and motioned for Ellena to follow him into the main yard. "This place doesn't run itself," he said. "In a ranch this size lives or dies by discipline." There was no boast in his tone, only truth. He walked her through the grounds with the steady confidence of a man who'd rebuilt broken barns in the dead of winter and ridden through snowstorms that swallowed weaker men whole. He showed her the cookhouse first. "You'll oversee the kitchen. The hands need 3 hearty meals a day. Hot coffee at sunrise, something warm at night. They work hard. They eat harder." Next came the feed storage. "You'll keep the ledger for the hay, the grain, the water stores. If something doesn't add up, you tell me." Then the infirmary corner in the barn, a small space with shelves of bandages, salves, and old medical tools. Men get thrown, trampled, cut, burned. Someone always needs tending. You'll see to that. Finally, the main house. You'll supervise the inside. Cleaning, laundry, supplies. Make sure everything stays in order. He said all of it matter-of-factly, not unkind, but without giving room for her opinion, as if he expected her to step fully into the role with the same silent determination she'd always shown. And maybe he wasn't wrong. Ellena listened without interrupting, taking in every word. She grew up between 2 worlds, Apache blood from her mother, frontier discipline from the Reverend's home, and both had carved in her a survival instinct sharper than most. Hard work did not frighten her. Hard men did not frighten her. The only thing that frightened her was failing the people who depended on her. Inside the house, the air smelled of cedar and dust and something faintly metallic, like old memories sealed into the walls. Sebastian paused near the staircase. "For now, your room is upstairs. The master room stays mine until—" He didn't finish the sentence. Sebastian rarely wasted breath on what didn't need saying. The days that followed were a blur of movement and muscle. Ellena rose before dawn every morning, lighting the cookhouse stoves, gathering eggs, slicing bacon, boiling coffee until the whole yard smelled awake. She scrubbed pans, filled water troughs, checked hay supplies, and cleaned the house until her arms trembled. Men came to her with cuts, bruises, sprains. She wrapped them in steady bandages, her touch firm but gentle. She never complained. She never paused long enough to think about herself. And always, whether she looked for it or not, she felt Sebastian's presence. He didn't hover. He didn't ask questions, but he saw everything. Some days he watched from the porch, arms crossed. Other days he passed silently through the barn while she worked. He never spoke more than necessary. Yet Ellena knew. He was measuring her, not in judgment, but in curiosity, in recognition. The ranch hands began to greet her respectfully, tipping their hats or offering small nods when she passed. She earned their acknowledgement through sweat, not title, and gradually the whispers faded, the stares softened. Silver Mesa stopped seeing her as the Apache girl and started seeing her as someone who belonged here. Every night, long after the sun dipped behind the mountain ridge, Ellena stood alone on the porch of that great timber house, aching, exhausted, but unbroken. In the silence, she could feel the land breathing around her, ancient and unyielding. Silver Mesa had wounds, so did she. And somehow, without a single conversation about it, both seemed to understand. This was where old scars met new soil, and something unexpected was beginning to take root. The late afternoon light slanted across Silver Mesa like liquid copper, warm yet fading. Ellena had just finished hauling clean linens up to the second-floor hallway when one of the ranch hands, a lanky kid with sandy hair, stepped inside and tipped his hat. "Miss Ellena, Ma'am Hattie wants to see you, over at the back cabin." Hattie Crane, Sebastian's grandmother. Ellena wiped her brow with the edge of her sleeve, dust clinging to her skin like a second layer. She nodded and headed toward the ridge behind the main house, where a small weathered cabin sat tucked beneath a juniper tree. Smoke curled softly from its chimney. The place had a stillness to it, old but not fragile, steady like a heartbeat that had survived storms. When Ellena knocked, a firm voice called, "Come in, child." Inside, the cabin smelled of sage bundles and old pine sap. Hattie Crane sat in a rocker by the window, her silver braid hanging thick down her back. Her face was etched with deep, purposeful lines, the kind carved by grit, heartbreak, and hard-won wisdom. Ellena stood awkwardly near the door. Hattie motioned her closer. "Sit, don't fidget. I didn't call you here to scold you." Ellena lowered herself into the wooden chair opposite her. For a long moment, Hattie watched her with eyes as sharp as a hawk's, piercing, perceptive, unyielding. Then she sighed as if releasing years she'd held inside. "You're working yourself ragged, girl, I see it." Ellena stiffened. "I'm only doing what's expected." "And more," Hattie said. "Plenty more. My grandson notices, even if he pretends he don't." Elena's pulse stuttered, not because she cared what Sebastian thought, but because she wasn't used to being seen. Hattie folded her hands in her lap, fingers knotted like dry roots. "There's something you ought to know about him, before you judge him too quick." Ellena didn't answer, but she listened. "Sebastian was born into horses, dust, and iron," Hattie began. "His daddy ran this ranch like a war camp, strict, cold, without mercy. He wanted an heir, not a boy. Didn't matter if the child cried, bled, broke a bone. He was to get back on the saddle. Crane men don't fall. That's what he used to say." Ellena felt a slow heaviness settle in her chest. Hattie continued, voice low but steady. "When Sebastian's mama died, he was just 10. There wasn't a soul left to soften that house. That boy grew up learning that silence was safer than hope, and work was the only thing that couldn't be taken from him." Outside, wind slid across the cabin walls with a mournful whistle, as if agreeing. "He got older," Hattie said, "and tried to be different than his father. He tried to let himself care. That's when Vanessa came along." Ellena remembered the name from stray town gossip. Pretty, charming, dangerous. "She was a pretty little wildfire from Dry Creek," Hattie said with a near snort. "Saw Sebastian's kindness, saw his money, and decided to take both. Played him like a fiddle." "Did he love her?" Ellena asked before she could stop herself. Hattie nodded once. "With the full, foolish heart of a young man wanting someone to finally choose him. But she didn't. Not when a richer cattle broker rolled in from the north. She left Sebastian standing in the street like a man mugged of something fragile." Ellena swallowed hard. "It broke something in him, child. Not beyond repair, but enough that he learned to close every door behind him." Hattie leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "That boy's not heartless, just guarded, and stubborn as a mule with his feet planted in clay." Ellena let out a tight breath, half understanding, half discomfort. Hattie's voice softened. "I called you here for a reason. You've got steel in your spine, girl. The quiet kind. The kind that holds steady when the world blows sideways. Apache blood makes you fierce. Life's made you steady. And that combination, well, Sebastian needs someone like that." Elena's throat tightened unexpectedly, a warmth coiling beneath her ribs. "In this land," Hattie said, tapping her cane against the floorboards, "storms don't just come from the sky. They come from grief, from old wounds, from things left unsaid. My grandson's been walking through those storms alone for years. But you," she pointed a thin, commanding finger, "you stand the way a person stands who knows what it feels like to survive a dust storm without blinking." Ellena didn't know what to say. Hattie leaned back, rocking gently. "I'm not telling you to love him. Heaven knows love can't be ordered like supplies for winter. But don't shut that heart of yours before it gets a chance to know something good." The words landed in Ellena like soft arrows. Quiet, sharp, impossible to ignore. When she left the cabin, the sky had deepened into indigo, the first stars pricking through. The air was cool, carrying the scent of dusk and horses and wood smoke. For the first time since arriving at Silver Mesa, Ellena felt something shift. Not in the ranch, not in the people around her, but inside herself. That night, as she lay awake listening to the distant sound of hooves and wind, her thoughts drifted, not to duty or survival or the Reverend's endless debts, but to Sebastian. And her heart, so disciplined and guarded all her life, softened its grip just a little, just enough for something new to breathe. The morning sun over Silver Mesa came in strong and unfiltered, the kind that painted everything in hard-edged gold and long shadows. Ellena had been hauling feed from the barn to the corral, her arms aching in a steady, familiar way. She preferred work. It kept her grounded, kept her mind from wandering places it shouldn't. The ranch hands were unusually tense. She caught whispers, saw glances toward the front road. Even the horses tossed their heads, restless. By noon, a cloud of dust rose beyond the gate. A stagecoach, fancy, polished, out of place in a land of sweat and saddle leather, rolled toward the main yard. Sunlight flashed off something scarlet, silky, extravagant. Then she stepped out. Vanessa. Even if Ellena had never seen her before, she would have known. The woman carried herself with an effortless, practiced grace, the kind that dripped vanity, charm, and concealed claws. Her gown was a cascade of deep crimson satin, far too fine for ranch roads. Gold earrings glimmered at her neck, each movement deliberate, calculated. She scanned the ranch with a confident tilt of her chin. Then her gaze landed on Ellena. A smile curled across her lips. Sweet on the surface, venomous underneath. "Well," Vanessa drawled, stepping closer, her perfume drifting through the dust like something honeyed but sharp. "So this is the wife." She let the word linger, dripping disdain. Her eyes swept Ellena from boots to braid, judging, mocking, dismissing. Ellena kept her back straight. She refused to flinch. Vanessa took another slow step, lowering her voice just enough for the insult to become intimate. "You know, darling, men like Sebastian don't marry women like you for love. They marry you because you're convenient, obedient, useful." Her smile widened. "But love? Oh no. That belongs to a woman who left a mark he never forgot." Ellena clenched her jaw, heat rising behind her ribs, but she refused to give Vanessa what she wanted, a reaction. Before she could speak, the heavy front door of the ranch house slammed open. Sebastian emerged, not calm, not distant, but storming. Dust lifted under his boots as he crossed the yard, his expression carved from granite. His shoulders were rigid, his steps long and forceful, his eyes locked on Vanessa with a coldness Ellena had never seen, not even when dealing with wild stallions. Vanessa's smile faltered. "Sebastian!" He didn't slow. "Why are you here?" His voice was low, dangerous, controlled in a way more frightening than a shout. Vanessa blinked, feigning hurt. "I thought perhaps you might want to see me. After all, we have history," he cut in, "that died the day you left without a word." Vanessa's breath caught, but she recovered quickly, tilting her head with an almost pitiful sweetness. "I was young. I made a mistake. You've forgiven worse from other people." "I didn't forgive you," he said flatly. "I moved on." Her eyes flicked to Ellena, and jealousy sharpened her voice. "Moved on? To this? To her?" Sebastian stepped between them. Directly, deliberately, protectively. Elena's heart stuttered. Vanessa let out a brittle laugh. "Don't tell me you actually care for—" "Enough!" Sebastian's voice cracked like a whip. "Vanessa, you will leave this ranch. Now. And you will never—" His shoulders squared, his jaw tightened. "Never speak about my wife again." The words hung in the air, solid as stone. "My wife." The phrase hit Ellena harder than the insult ever could. Her chest tightened. Not with fear, not with confusion, but with something warm, bewildering, and unfamiliar. Vanessa's face flushed with humiliation. She opened her mouth to protest, but the ranch hands had already closed in, ready to escort her out. Sebastian didn't look at her again. As the stagecoach turned back toward the road, Vanessa shot one last look, a glare filled with thwarted pride and simmering fury. But Sebastian's arm was already lowering. Done with her, done with the past. Ellena stood frozen, unsure what to do with the rush of emotion inside her. Sebastian finally exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders. He turned to her then, eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "You don't have to worry about her," he said quietly, "or anyone else who tries to belittle you. Not while you're under my roof." Ellena opened her mouth, but no words came. A strange flutter moved through her chest, unsteady but undeniable. For the first time since their marriage began, Sebastian's walls had cracked. And through that crack, something real, something raw, something startlingly gentle showed itself. And Ellena felt herself changing too. The following days unfolded beneath the wide, unbroken western sky. Days that felt different, quieter somehow, yet weighted with something simmering beneath the surface. After Vanessa's departure, a subtle shift settled between Ellena and Sebastian, as if the dust had finally begun to settle enough for them to see each other clearly. It began with simple things. A fence that needed mending after the last windstorm, a stubborn palomino refusing to cross the creek, rows of hay that had to be pulled in before the next round of darkening clouds rolled over the mesa. They worked side by side, steadfast, resilient, strong, and for the first time they talked. Not just polite words exchanged out of duty, not clipped directions or practical instructions, real conversation. As they repaired the southern fence line, Sebastian wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his gloved hand. "You handle a hammer better than most men I've hired." Ellena shrugged lightly, but her lips curved. "I built half the shelters my mother's people used on the trail. When you move often, you learn fast." "You moved a lot?" Her eyes drifted to the far horizon, where the land stretched out in shades of copper and faded gold. "My mother's clan traveled through the desert valleys. I learned to run before I learned to walk. Dust storms, flash floods, raiders. We learned to read danger before it came." She paused. "We learned to disappear when we had to." There was no pity in Sebastian's gaze, only respect. Quiet, deep, unwavering. Later that week, they guided a band of horses down the shallow creek bed. The animals splashed and snorted, their hooves flashing through sunlight. Sebastian, riding just behind Ellena, watched the way she moved with the animals. Fluid, instinctive, almost wild in her grace. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. "To my mother's people?" She shook her head with a slow exhale. "They scattered, some to reservations, some farther west, some, who knows?" Her voice softened. "The desert used to feel like home. Now I'm not sure where home is." Sebastian didn't answer, but something tightened in his expression. As if her words struck a place inside him he rarely let anyone touch. On the third day, thunderheads stacked heavy over the plains. They rushed to gather loose hay into the barn before the storm broke. Wind whipped Elena's braid, dust swirling around her boots. Sebastian worked beside her, steady and unyielding, his movements strong, deliberate, commanding. When the first drops began to fall, they ran toward the horse barn, sliding inside just as rain hammered the roof like 1,000 hurried footsteps. The world shrank to a dim, echoing shelter, smelling of horses, damp wood, and warm breath. Ellena pushed wet strands of hair from her face, chest rising and falling from the sprint. Sebastian stood only a few feet away, rain dripping from his shirt, his eyes fixed on her. Not with distance, not with restraint, but with something vulnerable and almost startled. For a long moment, they didn't speak. Then he stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as though approaching a skittish colt. "You know," he said, voice low and roughened by emotion he couldn't hide, "you've changed this place." Ellena blinked, unsure she heard right. "Changed? Silver Mesa?" He shook his head gently. "No, you've changed me." Her breath hitched. Sebastian looked at her with an intensity that made the space between them feel charged, humming like a storm waiting to break. "Ellena," he said softly, "you make this place warm again. For years this ranch was just land and lumber, a duty, a cage sometimes." His throat worked as he swallowed. "But since you came," he took another step, close enough for her to feel his breath. "Silver Mesa wasn't home until you walked into it." Heat flared beneath her ribs, unexpected, trembling, overwhelming. No one had ever spoken to her with such unguarded sincerity. She whispered, "Sebastian." Rain pounded harder on the tin roof, drowning out everything but the quiet thundering of her heart. His hand rose, not forcefully, not possessively, but with a gentleness she never knew he possessed. He touched her cheek as though she were something fragile and fiercely precious all at once. Ellena didn't pull away. The barn seemed to exhale around them, and then slow, certain, inevitable, their lips met. It wasn't a rushed kiss, not a desperate one, but a deep, anchoring kiss filled with emotion neither of them had dared name until that moment. a kiss that tasted like rain and warmth and long-buried longing. When they finally parted, breath unsteady, Ellena leaned her forehead against his. For the first time since coming to Silver Mesa, she understood. Home wasn't a place. It was a person. The days that followed carried a different kind of light across Silver Mesa, softer, warmer, almost tender. It wasn't something the ranch hands talked about openly, but they felt it. The horses moved easier. The men whistled more. The silence that once clung to the big ranch house loosened, replaced by something unmistakably alive. And it all began with the two people who had once walked its halls like strangers. In the early mornings before the sun climbed over the eastern ridge, Sebastian and Ellena would take their coffee out to the porch. The world at that hour was still half asleep, the sky painted in washed-out blues, the distant hills wrapped in a quiet, dreamy haze, and the air crisp with a peaceful coolness. Sebastian always sat beside her, not across, not apart, but beside, close enough for their shoulders to brush when she lifted her cup. "Never gets old," he would murmur, watching the sunlight pour down the slope like slow-spilled honey. "No," Ellena would whisper, feeling the calm stretch through her like a long breath. "It doesn't." Those moments felt almost stolen, gentle pockets of peace in a land known more for hardship than softness. During the day, the ranch hummed with its familiar rhythm, but something deeper had changed. Now, when Ellena walked into the kitchen, there was laughter. Not the mocking kind she grew up dodging in Dry Creek, but genuine, warm laughter that wrapped around her like a wool blanket. The cook, a big man with a beard like a winter thicket, always said, "Mornin', mistress of the Mesa." The first time he said it, Ellena had nearly dropped the basket of potatoes she was carrying. "Mistress," she repeated, cheeks warming. "Course," he replied with a knowing grin. "This ranch listens to you now, and so does the boss." The nickname spread faster than prairie fire. At first, she tried to protest. She told them she didn't earn it, didn't deserve such respect. But the hands only shook their heads and tipped their hats. "Respect doesn't wait for permission," one of them told her. "You earned it the day you showed up and got to work." Those words stayed with her. Sometimes she and Sebastian rode out across the thistle-dotted plains. They shared one horse when mending the upper pasture fences, Ellena sitting in front, Sebastian steady behind her, his arms braced around her as he guided the reins. Those rides were quiet but filled with unspoken warmth, the kind that made her heart flutter when she caught him watching her from beneath the shadow of his hat. In the evenings after supper, Sebastian would settle in the old armchair by the hearth, while Ellena curled up on the buffalo hide rug with a book. The fire crackled, throwing amber light across his face, softening the edges that life had carved into him. Sometimes he read aloud, voice low and calm, and she found comfort in the cadence. Sometimes he didn't read at all, just watched her with a lingering gaze that made her chest warm and unsteady. It was during those nights that Ellena first let herself believe something dangerous, that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of being loved. Sebastian changed too. The man known for his stern, unyielding nature began to soften in ways the ranch never expected. He smiled more. He lingered longer during conversations with the men. He checked on the animals with a gentleness that hadn't been there before. One evening, as they repaired an old stirrup in the tack room, one of the younger ranch hands whispered to Ellena, "Never thought I'd see the boss this easy." He scratched his head awkwardly. "You did that, Miss Ellena." She didn't know how to respond. Praise had always been foreign to her, always something to distrust. Yet here, in this place that once felt too big for her, she found people meeting her with trust, admiration, even affection. And at the center of it all was Sebastian. His presence steadied her. His touch, still rare but increasingly fearless, sent warmth rushing through her. She found herself reaching for him in small ways, brushing hay off his shoulder, steadying his arm as they crossed a muddy patch, leaning against him on the porch swing when the sky faded into deep purples. Each small gesture stitched them closer. The happiness was new, unfamiliar, yet breathtaking. And though neither of them said the word love, it hung in the air around them. In the echo of their laughter, in the quiet of shared mornings, in the softness of their evenings, in the simple, powerful way the ranch now felt like a home for them both. For the first time in her life, Ellena allowed herself to believe it. She belonged, she was wanted, she was more than useful. She was cherished, and she began to hope, dangerously, beautifully, that the warmth settling over Silver Mesa might stay. At least, for a while. The peace that had slowly taken root at Silver Mesa didn't break all at once. It cracked, quietly, like the first fracture in a winter pond, hardly noticeable until the whole surface trembled. It began in Dry Creek. The ranch hands who rode into town for supplies returned with stiff shoulders and tight mouths. When Ellena walked past them in the barn one morning, their voices dropped to murmurs. She sensed the shift instantly. Heavy, uneasy, cautious, like men treading around a wound that wasn't theirs. By midday, the truth reached her. Vanessa had started talking. No, whispering. And whispers traveled faster than wildfire on the prairie. She heard the first rumor from a young stable boy who didn't realize she was behind him. They say the boss bought her, he muttered. Like some bargain bride. Her stomach nodded. Later, two women visiting the ranch to trade milk for herbs whispered near the porch. They say Sebastian's only pretending, that the Apache girl is just filling space until he can take Vanessa back. Each word was like a stone thrown into her chest, cold, sharp, unavoidable. By sunset, she had heard everything. That she wasn't a real wife, that she wasn't truly loved, that Sebastian married her only to keep the ranch's image clean after debts threatened Silver Mesa, that Vanessa was his true love, the woman he couldn't forget. It didn't matter that none of it sounded like Sebastian. Rumors didn't care about truth. They lived on fear, and Ellena had plenty of that buried inside her. Old insecurities, the ones she thought she'd buried under the warmth of their new life, rose like dust in a desert wind. The feeling of being half apart, half unwelcome, of being tolerated, not chosen, of being someone's responsibility instead of someone's heart. When she walked into the kitchen that evening, her hands trembled. The warmth that had filled the ranch for weeks suddenly felt fragile, like a lantern flickering in a storm. Sebastian found her on the back porch just as dusk settled over the mesa, staining the land in somber, rose-tinted hues. She stood very still, gripping the railing as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Ellena," he said quietly, stepping closer. "Tell me what happened." She lifted her eyes. They were bright with hurt she fought hard to hide. "There are things being said in Dry Creek." His jaw went tight. "What things?" "That I was bought." Her voice shook despite her efforts to steady it. "That you don't really care for me. That Vanessa is the one you—" His whole body stiffened, fury igniting in his eyes, cold, blazing, uncontainable. "Who said it?" he demanded. "You know who." She exhaled shakily. "Vanessa." Sebastian's breath came sharp and rough, like a bull yanking against a rope. "She's poisoning the whole damn town," he growled. "Dragging your name, our marriage, through every saloon, every market, every church pew." Ellena looked away, voice small. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe people will always see me as—" He stepped forward so suddenly she gasped. "Don't," he said fiercely. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." She blinked at him, startled by the intensity in his voice. "You belong here more than anyone," he said, voice deep, steady, burning with conviction. "This ranch breathes different because of you. I breathe different because of you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the rumors gnawed at her like hungry wolves. Sebastian saw it, and something inside him snapped. "That's it," he said abruptly. "I'm done letting lies fester. I'm done letting Vanessa drag you through the mud while we stay quiet." "What do you mean?" "We're going to the county festival." His voice was firm, unshakable. "Everyone in this region will be there. If they want to stare, let them stare. If they want to whisper, let them whisper." He reached for her hand, gentle, strong, resolute. "I'm going to show every last one of them who you are," he said, "and who you are to me." Her breath caught. "You don't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes," he said softly, squeezing her fingers. "I do." Night settled around them, dark, protective, humming with tension. But for the first time that day, Ellena felt her heartbeat slow. Not because the rumors had vanished, but because Sebastian wasn't stepping away from her. He was stepping toward her, in front of her, beside her. As they stood on the porch overlooking Silver Mesa, the wind brushed past them, carrying dust, worry, and the remnants of hurt away into the dark. Whatever was coming at the county festival, they would face it together. The county festival lit up the valley long before they reached it. Lanterns swung from timber posts, casting buttery, flickering light across the packed dirt square. Fiddles wailed, boots stamped in rhythm, and the smell of roasted corn drifted through the cooling evening air. Silver Mesa usually kept its distance from crowds, but tonight, Sebastian held Elena's hand firmly as they stepped off the wagon. People turned, some curious, some judgmental, some whispering already. Ellena lifted her chin. She was nervous, yes, but she wouldn't shrink. Not tonight. Sebastian walked close beside her, his palm warm around her own, his presence solid, grounding, protective. Every step he took said one thing: she is mine, and I stand with her. They moved through the festival, stopping near the main square where townsfolk gathered to dance. Oil lamps dangled from a high wooden beam, shimmering like tiny stars above the crowd. That was when Vanessa appeared. Her dress was an extravagant swirl of blue satin, the kind that glittered under lantern light. Her smile was slow, sugary, practiced, polished in its cruelty. She glided toward them, ignoring Ellena completely as she placed a delicate hand on Sebastian's arm. "Sebastian," she purred, "won't you share a dance with an old friend?" Conversation around them softened into a hum as people leaned closer, waiting for drama. Vanessa tilted her chin in theatrical innocence. "It's just one dance," she said, voice dripping charm. "We used to move so well together. You haven't forgotten, have you?" Sebastian didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Ellena, softly, deliberately, as if she were the only person whose thoughts mattered. But Ellena refused to hold him back. She stepped aside, not out of submission, but out of strength, and spoke quietly. "If that's what you want, you can go." Her voice didn't tremble. Her honesty cut deeper than jealousy ever could. Vanessa's smile sharpened, triumphant. She waited for him to step toward her. Instead, Sebastian exhaled slowly, shaking his head as if shedding years of old shadows. "No," he said. The music quieted. Vanessa's face froze. Sebastian turned fully toward Ellena, his expression open, earnest, unguarded in a way he had never been before. "What I want," he said, voice deep and steady, "is you." Elena's breath caught. Vanessa's eyes widened, disbelief hitting her like a slap. "Sebastian?" He didn't even look at her. "You had your chance," he said calmly, "and I'm done letting the past crawl into places it no longer belongs." The rejection was so final, so absolute, that Vanessa stepped back as if physically pushed. Sebastian took Elena's hand again, not gently this time, but with a decisive, protective certainty, and guided her toward the center of the square, where couples spun beneath the lanterns. A murmur rippled through the crowd as they stepped onto the dance floor. The fiddlers found a softer tune, slow, warm, intimate. Sebastian slipped an arm around her waist. Ellena rested her hand on his shoulder. The world shrank to the space between them. "You shouldn't have to doubt yourself," he murmured as they moved. "Not because of rumors, not because of her, not because of anything." Ellena swallowed hard. "But people think—" "Let them think," he said firmly. "I don't give a damn what this town whispers. I know who you are. I know what you mean to me." His forehead brushed hers. Her pulse stumbled. The music pulsed around them, steady as a heartbeat, while lantern light painted gold across Sebastian's jaw and caught the shine in Elena's eyes. For a moment, it felt like the whole festival faded. No gossip, no doubts, no wounds. Just two people moving together beneath the open western sky. Vanessa stood at the edge of the crowd, stunned, the jealousy burning in her expression no longer hidden. She watched them with bitter disbelief as the townsfolk around her murmured. Soft sympathy for Ellena, sharper judgment for Vanessa herself, but none of that mattered. Sebastian's grip tightened around Elena's waist, anchoring her to him as he whispered, "You're the one I choose, today, tomorrow, every day after." The words sank into her like a warm tide, dissolving the cold knot in her chest. For the first time since the rumors began, Ellena breathed freely. Not because the world had changed, but because Sebastian had chosen her publicly, unmistakably, irrevocably. As the dance ended, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles under the lantern glow. The crowd watched, Vanessa watched, Dry Creek watched, and Sebastian did not look away. Ellena felt it then, deep, trembling, undeniable. She was no longer standing on the edges of life. She was at the center of someone's heart. The lanterns flickered in the evening breeze, casting warm circles of light across the county square. Dust swirled softly at people's feet as the music faded into a hush. It wasn't silence born from discomfort. It was the kind that comes when 100 hearts hold their breath at the same time. Sebastian stepped forward, still holding Elena's hand. He didn't raise his voice, but it carried. Steady, unwavering, unmistakably sure. "I choose Ellena," he said. The words struck the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. Every whisper died. Every doubtful face turned toward them. Not because of duty, he continued, not because of circumstance. His jaw tightened with quiet emotion. But because she is the heart of my life. A breeze swept across the square just then, gentle, blessing-like, lifting the brim of Elena's hat and brushing loose strands of her dark hair. She felt it glide across her cheeks, almost as if Dry Creek itself had softened toward her. The same town that once watched her from the corners of their eyes. The same town that doubted she belonged. Now they simply looked, not with suspicion, but with a dawning understanding. Ellena stood beside him, breath trembling. She had learned how to survive storms, outrun danger, hide in shadows. But standing under that lantern glow, with Sebastian's fingers locked around hers, she realized this was a new kind of courage, one she had never been taught. Belonging. He faced the crowd, shoulders squared with the unmistakable poise of a man who knew exactly what mattered. She is my wife, he said, my partner, my equal, the woman I stand beside in every fight and every quiet morning. A murmur rippled through the square, not disapproval, but something softer, acceptance, respect. Vanessa, standing stiffly at the edge of the gathering, finally lowered her gaze. The fight in her posture melted, replaced by something hollow. People noticed her for what she was at last, not a victim of lost love, but someone who had tried to poison what she could not have. But Ellena didn't look at Vanessa. Her eyes were fixed on Sebastian. He turned back to her, his expression open, steady, and achingly sincere. You once told me you weren't sure where you belong, he murmured. But I knew the moment you stepped onto Silver Mesa. Her throat tightened. And where is that? With me, he said softly, always. Emotion washed over her like a warm tide, deep, trembling, healing. For so long, she had carried the weight of being half in, half out of every place she touched. A girl between worlds, a girl without a clear name in the eyes of society. But here in front of everyone, that weight finally loosened. Silver Mesa Ranch wasn't just land. It wasn't just work or routine or responsibility. It was home. And Sebastian, the man who once held his heart behind walls so thick no one dared approach, was now looking at her as if she were the only clear thing in a dusty, uncertain world. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, the gesture tender enough to melt the last frozen corner of her heart. Lantern light shimmered across his face when he whispered, "You're the one I choose, Ellena. Every day, every season, every sunrise over those silver hills." The fiddles began again, soft, hopeful, slow. Not for drama, not for spectacle, but as if celebrating something true and overdue. People stepped aside as Sebastian guided Ellena out of the square and onto the hill overlooking the festival lights. The grass there shimmered pale and soft in the moon's silver glow. Delicate, peaceful, wild, just like the first stirrings of love between two people who had fought so hard to reach it. Ellena looked at the ranch lights in the distance, scattered across the mesa like stars that had fallen to earth. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "A place, a name, a man who stands beside me." Sebastian wrapped an arm around her, pulling her against his chest with a quiet certainty. "And I never thought I'd have someone who could heal this land. And me." She leaned into him, trusting the warmth of his touch, the truth in his words. The wind brushed through the silver grass, carrying away the last remnants of doubt. Ellena, once the quiet Apache girl standing on the outskirts of every celebration, was no longer a shadow on the edge. She was the woman chosen, the woman cherished, the woman loved. And for the first time in her life, she felt the truth settle deep within her. Home wasn't something you found. It was something that found you. And hers was here, with Sebastian, on the silver hills of Silver Mesa.